I just want to take on this idea to do with attention, and particularly a distinction between divided attention and undivided attention. And I want to see if I can challenge the orthodoxy which says that undivided attention is superior to divided attention, that the ability to sustain a single idea across a series of iterations or along the process of an argument or across a complex narrative is an inherently valuable thing, and certainly more valuable than a divided attention, in which, for example, one's only able to commit one's attention to something for a few minutes or seconds at a time before going on to something else. Okay, the first thing I want to try to do with that is just to see if I can layer this idea of undivided attention against what I think are its correlates, and one of the things I think it's getting its values from. And then I'll talk a little bit about structure. I think one of the reasons why undivided attention feels valuable is because it seems to align itself to other undivided ideas within an ideal Cartesian subject. The ideal Cartesian subject, what it feels like to be a person, and what we value as a person, and what we kind of characterize as an ideal person in some ways, is and feel intuitively is the paradigm of what a person is to do with this undividedness. I think it's to do with the fact that a person has a sense of an undivided consciousness. There's no particular evidence for this, but subjectively that's exactly how it feels. When you go to sleep, you wake up in the following morning, and it doesn't feel like you wake up to a different consciousness. It feels like you wake up to the same consciousness. And even though you can look back across your history and kind of project into your future and imagine all kinds of possible alternatives, you always imagine yourself occupying the same kind of space of conscious thought. So we have this sense of a single undivided consciousness which marks out what it feels to be a person, I think. We also have this affection for the kind of undivided and consistent identity of a person. I guess that kind of related to consciousness, but it's slightly different. We like it, and we feel it's authentic when we have a friend and they don't change very much. They don't appear tomorrow in a different guise, or we don't see them operating very differently in one context than they do in another context. We don't see them switching their political allegiances or their ideological ideas according to context. We like the idea that there's a consistent set of values and concepts which are animating that person, and that's undivided and consistent. So I think again there's a sense of the Cartesian subject as being undivided in that way, and there are other undividednesses as well. And I think the undividedness of attention and the valuing of that, sustaining of attention, it fits into part of that. I think when we think about a person who is incapable of sustaining attention over any period of time for more than a few minutes or seconds, we worry if their subjectivity is flawed. And here I'm reminded of Clive Waring, who was a musician who, I think he either had brain injury or some kind of problems with that anyway, and he was incapable of laying down new memories. So he lives in this moment of a kind of permanent now moment, where he's only able to remember the last 15 seconds of his life. So every few moments is like an awakening to him. I say literally, for completely biological and biochemical reasons, cannot sustain attention for more than a few seconds, and we feel there's an assault there on his very subjectivity. He doesn't come across, when we think about it, as an entirely whole Cartesian subject. So I think this, as I say, the valuing of attention comes partly from that. Now, in terms of structure, I think the idea of sustaining attention is worth considering. What does it mean when we say we are able to sustain attention and keep our attention undivided? And I think a lot of that is to do with what mechanisms we use to collate and make coherent the inputs that we're getting from the world. So, for example, if I'm reading a novel, and when I get to chapter 4, I can remember and trace the narrative lines from the various characters through the previous 3 chapters. that's a symptom of my ability to keep my attention undivided. But I'm doing that because I have the mechanisms to draw narratives and to see causalities and to establish chains of causality and to work human relationships. And I have a set of mechanisms in place. In other words, a set of heuristics or a set of techniques for turning moments of attention into large swathes of sustained attention. And the same thing with theories or philosophical arguments or jokes or songs. There are a series of mechanisms in place which I can draw upon to turn moments of attention into a coherent, sustained swathe of undivided attention. Okay, this has got a bit of a shift here. So is there a value therefore to undivided attention? And I think there is. I think if we take the attention away from the Cartesian subject for a minute and stop attaching ourselves to that and instead think of the collective or the group or the community or the society, then we can start thinking, does divided attention, these fragmentary moments of thought or ideas or inputs or outputs that we have, do they have a value outside of the ideal Cartesian subject? In other words, are there mechanisms within the larger society, within the group, community and culture, which perform these acts of cohering, which bring together these fragmentary moments into coherent wholes, in the same way the mechanisms in individual cognition bring together those moments into narratives or sustained moments of theoretical engagement, that kind of thing. I think in many ways there are. I mean, the simplest examples, for example, is, let's have a little think. Well, about every 3 or 4 years in this country and every 4 years in the States, most of us, adults at least, spend, I don't know, a few minutes or hours thinking about politics, and then we spend a few seconds putting an X in a box in a ballot station. And that tiny moment of our individual attention is aggregated through the systems of a democratic process and parliamentary democracy, is turned into governance. I mean, it's not the only thing that does it, but it's fragmentary moments of attention like that, compiled by a mechanism outside of the individual human subject, but resident within the society, which turns individual attention into something which is sustained, but not as an individual level, but on a social and cultural level. Other examples might include something like open source software, something like Linux, for example, or like OpenOffice. These are written. Partly they're written by people who do spend quite a lot of time writing the main core of these things, but a lot of the code for those pieces of software are written by people with a few minutes to spare, who write a patch or write a few lines of code to contribute to that. But that small moment of highly divided attention on an individual level is collated and aggregated by the various systems of whereby those things come together into a highly sustained and highly undivided piece of software that works really well. So I think there are again moments of aggregation which exist not at the individual level of the Cartesian subject, but at the cultural level of this kind of distributed operation, where this attention is distributed, whilst initially distributed across a large number of distributed individuals, is collated and aggregated through the workings of a system. I think that's probably all I've got to say on that, really.